Joining me now is founder and proprietor of ReaganBaby.com, Megan Barth. Megan, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Liz. Great to be here.
Let's talk about polls first. Obviously, the polls are important at this point, if only to help the candidates qualify for these debates. Huckabee, as we see, was relegated to the undercard debate because he couldn't meet any of these standards. And Rand Paul, who many thought wouldn't hit these marks either, surprised us all and made it up to the big stage. But as the polls relate to actually securing the nomination, or as an indication of who will win each state, do you think the poll or the numbers mean anything yet, or is it still too early?
I think it's still too early, but I think what we're going to find is as we approach February, we're going to see a dwindling down of the field. Right now, it's a very crowded field, as it always has been. But I think you see Rand Paul rise a little bit, specifically because of the Islamic and Syrian immigration issue that we're facing. And he puts a bill forward in Congress that tackles this issue. And this issue will be, I believe, center to this debate tonight as far as foreign policy, the Syrian refugee crisis, and what we have going on right now in LA, as well as San Bernardino, the terrorist attack.
What, in your opinion, what about the fall of Ben Carson in the polls and the rise of Ted Cruz? Is that significant for either of their campaigns?
Yeah, I think it is, because foreign policy is going to be center stage tonight, and it's going to be center stage in the debates forthcoming when we go up against Hillary Clinton. So I think when it comes to foreign policy, that's where Ben Carson is lacking amongst at least trust in the voters. And that's what you see in this polling. It's who are the voters going to trust to provide us the safety and security of our nation, which in the last 7 years, when you look at the foreign policy under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton at the State Department, we have basically a world on fire right now. The second largest terrorist attack took place on our soil just in San Bernardino. And we're living now with 76% of the American people in fear that there will be another terrorist attack. So with Ben Carson, his foreign policy experience is lacking, and that shows in his polling. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, is rising, and I do believe that is due to the fact that Donald Trump kind of threw some shade his way, and he replied, and perhaps gave him a little bit more name recognition amongst the voting populace.
I'm glad you brought up the trust among American voters for candidates. Now, some people claim that voters don't even make their final decisions about who they're going to vote for until Election Day, until right before they vote. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think it is true, because when you look at the demographics and when you look at the statistics, people will vote based on who they trust. This is a similar statistic for men, a similar statistics towards women. And because we have such a crowded field right now, people are going to most likely, when they do go to the polls, maybe make that last-minute decision on who they're going to pull the lever for based on who they trust to keep them safe and secure.
Okay, so the debate is happening right now in Las Vegas. You're there in Vegas. What was the atmosphere like going into the debate compared to the second GOP debate, also hosted by CNN?
Would you repeat that question, Liz? I missed it.
Sure. I said, what is the atmosphere like compared to the second GOP debate, also hosted by CNN? What's the atmosphere like going into the debate?
There is a lot of energy, as there was with the last one. There's a lot of people talking, obviously, about Trump as they were in the last one, based on his Muslim immigration statement and based on the terrorist attack that just happened on American soil. So there's a lot of interest to see who in this field, who in this crowded field is going to rise to build that trust, not only amongst GOP voters, but independent voters who will come to the polls as well. It's about basically the candidates need to say what they are for instead of what they are against, so they can unite the GOP party, create a bigger tent to bring in perhaps those Ronald Reagan Democrats, as well as the independent voters, the libertarians, in order to coalesce a good, a voting surge come November.
Right, to grow the size of the tent, if you will. Now, this debate is different in that the main stage is a smaller structure than the other debates have been. What's the purpose of that?
Well, I believe the purpose of that is to allow the candidates that are leading in the polls. I mean, you see Trump now at 41%. Cruz is #1 in Iowa, Rubio, Bush, are all kind of polling the same, but we need to have a smaller field. The candidates need more time on the stage in order to communicate to the American people where they stand on some very critical issues that are facing our nation right now. So I believe this smaller stage will allow the candidates to better express themselves, make the points that they need to make to inspire that confidence that they're looking for.
What about the undercard debates? In your opinion, is that continuing to provide value to the American voter? Or after that first debate, maybe even the second debate, where people wanted to see everybody and what all the candidates had to offer, should we stop offering these undercard debates anymore?
Well, I always am an advocate for more information is the best information, and more dialogue always makes for better dialogue. But at this point in time, and as we're approaching the primaries, perhaps we should focus on those candidates, and maybe the next debate will do so, where we just have one main stage, and then the other candidates that are polling so low perhaps can then just carry the message of the leading candidates, whoever they support and get behind and endorse, so we can create that big tent, so we can have a really good voter turnout for the safety and security of our country, as well as our economic policy. We have a lot of issues facing this country right now. The next president is going to inherit quite a large mess, and so the smaller field will be beneficial. The happy hour debate, although it does provide us more information, more dialogue, which is always a good thing, perhaps that dialogue and that information would be better used if it was channeled towards a candidate of their choice.
Now, could you get a feel for the crowds if they perhaps favored a particular candidate going into this debate? What was the general attitude there?
Well, I've seen people that are supporting, all different candidates. Yet I went to a Trump rally to cover it last night, and he had about 1,000 people there, and we had Black Lives Matter protesters show up and try to disrupt the rally on a few different occasions, and they were taken out quite quickly. But, I've talked to cab drivers, I've talked to bellhops, I've talked to front desk clerks, and it seems to be they seem to vote or want to vote for Trump. And the reason being is they don't believe that he's lying. He's not beholden to anybody. He's not beholden to special interests. He's funding his own campaign, and he is speaking what they're thinking. Without a rose-colored lens. He's very direct. Some people will call him bombastic, but yet a good cross-section of the people that I've talked to, and I was even talking to a guy that was a janitor that was working outside the Trump rally and stopped and was listening, and he said, "This guy has my vote. I like what he says." So from my personal experience and from who I've talked to, and I've talked to quite a few people of all different backgrounds, they seem to be Trump supporters.
Megan, I appreciate you coming on the program. It looks like exciting times there in Vegas tonight. Hope to see you